puts up a three. And a goal!
Bearcat Blitz coming at you on another episode. Second episode of May, as we get into the full thick of the off season, things slowing down all over the place for Bearcats basketball and football, although transfer portal still cooking from both sides of those sports. Portal closed, of course, on both sides, but offers and contact and a potential commitment still looming out there, especially for Bearcats basketball, who has that one final scholarship spot remaining. Welcome in, everybody. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, and joined by my co-host, Neil Meyer, both of us at BearcatsTalk.com. Neil from FrontOfficeNews.com as well. You can catch us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out there. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We're brought to you by Bet Online for this show. It's your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoffs, and more. All the latest stats, news, and scores are available to follow your favorite teams at Bet Online. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And we will start this show with the latest kind of looks at the transfer portal for UC basketball. They're starting to contact some more players in recent days. It's starting to feel like the Sean Stewart hopes and dreams are dwindling. It does not seem like UC is going to end up getting Stewart. Not for sure, not set in stone just yet, but more days to go by, the less likely it seems. We'll get into an addition to the schedule for the Bearcats basketball team. Plus, in the second segment, Arkansas transfer tight end coming to Cincinnati by way of Louisville first, then to Arkansas, then to Cincinnati. Former player for Scott Satterfield. We'll dive into that. And Dontay Corleone, the next up guy for the Bearcats in terms of a top 2-round projection in the NFL draft. Dontay Corleone getting first-round projections from a few major outlets. Could be a big-time first-round projected season for Dontay Corleone, with him moving back to his 2022 masterclass position. We'll dive into that to close the show as well. But first, we'll get a message from our great sponsors. Neil, let's bring you in, my man. Basketball transfer portal. We are in the thick of it right now. And Cincinnati seemingly not necessarily moving on from Sean Stewart. It feels like, Neil, they're definitely not doing that, but they're preparing for the chance, the high, I would say more likely chance than not, that he ends up picking either Georgetown or Ohio State. Has taken visits to there in recent days. And it's just, it's going to be very difficult to match the war chest of NIL just assets that Ohio State has at their disposal. And these were two sides, Neil, that were huge finalists for Sean Stewart last season, last year, obviously last cycle in 2023, before he ultimately picked Duke. I think it's going to be very difficult to jump both of those schools and end up getting a player who would maybe push this roster over the top in Clifton.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And I know we talked about it earlier in the week on our show, but Sean Stewart did visit Georgetown on Tuesday, and then he was making a visit to Ohio State, it appeared. So overall, I mean, Ohio State, Russ, we've been able to see what they've been able to do in the transfer portal since Jake Diebler has taken over. They have really addressed the NIL situation very well, and that is something that Ohio State is very good at, is the NIL landscape. They really understand it. So overall, I mean, that's something that would probably maybe come into consideration in terms of Sean Stewart. But overall, I mean, it seems to me, Russ, we talked about Sean Stewart over the weekend, but it appears to me that he's going to stay in this Midwest area, whether it be Cincinnati, Ohio State, or Georgetown. It's clear that he's going to want to stay up this kind of way. But overall, those are three big schools. And I mean, all three are great opportunities for Sean Stewart. But right now, I wouldn't say the chances are dwindling out for Sean Stewart to be at Cincinnati. But it sounds like right now, I think we talked, he was projected to make his commitment on Monday, May 6th. So overall we're 3 days out, but right now it looks like it would be trending towards one of the other two schools if you were to ask me, Russ.
I agree. Yeah, like I wouldn't say Cincinnati's out. There hasn't been any reports of
Mm.
any of that any team is out, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Mm.
Just the fact that it's been 5 days since the visit. You're
A
not
lot
the
more
last
contact,
visit.
a lot more
Right.
portal contact entries.
Exactly. That's a great point too, Neil. And it's a great segue to the back half of this, or the second third of this basketball segment, as we touch on Morehead State getting scheduled for the non-conference slate. Probably going to be the season opener against Morehead State, depending on if that November 8th reported date is going to be finalized. But pinging the portal real quick, looking at Cincinnati's contact in recent days, this has been over the past 3 or 4 days that they have set up a potential visit with UTSA forward Trey Edmonds III, 6'10", 255-pound big man, has 1 season of eligibility left and posted 7 points and 5.8 rebounds per game on a nice 55.8% shooting last season. Brings a lot of size to the table, could definitely be a solid kind of mix-in option to kind of help back up Aziz Bandaogo, mix in as a backup alongside Arrington Page and Tyler McKinley at that 4-5 hybrid front court position ranking group right there. And then also North Florida junior guard Chaz Lanier. That's an awesome name, Chaz Lanier. Love it. 19.7 points, 4.8 rebounds per game last season. Was very, very strong as a scorer. Efficient, 51.2% from the field, Neil. He shot 44% from deep on 7.5 attempts per game. I mean, this guy can fill it up, and he brings size to the table as well. Interesting offer here, Neil. And I think an interesting debate for this coaching staff. If Chaz Lanier wants to join as well, and maybe a Landon Hatton or a Trey Edmonds also wants to join the roster, and you only have 1 spot, how do they handle that situation? Because they can't tell another guy to enter the portal at this point. If they wanted CJ Frederick to enter, it doesn't matter. They can't make him do it. He's a part of the roster. He's a part of it's all finalized right now. He is a part of the UC roster if he wants to be in 2024-25, because the portal has shut down earlier this week. So an interesting kind of 2 pings right there, Neil, where you have dividing paths, so to speak, along the yellow brick road. Do you go for more size and maybe a little bit more defensive depth, or do you go for more speed, more wing depth, and a fill it up scorer that you could pair with 2 to 3 other massively, massively effective 3-point shooters? I mean, Neil, you could have 4 3-point shooting artists on the floor alongside Aziz Bandaogo in some lineups and just run teams all over the gym and put up 4 or 5 3-point attempts every 2 minutes. It could be that kind of efficiency and that worthy of those amount of shots if you can land this amount of shooters on your roster. Very interesting debate that this coaching staff probably has to have with themselves over the next week or so.
Yeah, and that's a very great point that you just made up, Russ, about having the potential 3 shooters alongside Aziz Bandaogo. And I mean, they saw it firsthand last season.
4. You could have Hickman, Lukosius, Frederick, and Lanier. You could go 4 wide with Bandaogo.
Yeah, and it's a very great point that you mentioned that, because they saw it firsthand last season with the team 45 minutes up the road in Dayton. I mean, Dayton was a prime example of that and what Anthony Grant has done. I mean, now this is going to be a whole different Dayton squad with Nate Santos in the portal, Kobe Bray committing to Kentucky, De'Rom Holmes testing the NBA draft waters. I mean, overall, they saw it firsthand and how efficient they were. I mean, yes, Dayton is the mid-major level, but look at the success that they have had over recent years. And looking at the transfer portal, I mean, Kobe Bray goes to Kentucky. He's going to get a great opportunity down there. And then Nate Santos still in the portal looking for a new home. So, I mean, overall, they saw it firsthand. And that'd be a very interesting lineup too, Russ, to think about. If you could go 4 wide with a guy like Chaz Lanier, pretty dangerous roster if you ask me. I mean, Chaz Lanier can score it in all levels. We saw Simas Lukosius able to score it in all levels. Connor Hickman, even guys like Jizzle James, Day Thomas at the point guard, whatever that point guard position comes out to. We know, we've seen it time in and time out that the point guard's there. Whether it's Jizzle James dominated at the end of his freshman season, you put him out there with a kind of a combo pair of Hickman, Frederick, Lukosius, and Lanier, or whatever it might be, whatever lineup you can put.
A lot of fun ones.
It's going to be a fun one, and there's going to be a lot of volume scoring. So overall, transfer portal, Russ, it's about to get interesting. Obviously, there's only one scholarship left. They've been in contact with a lot of different people, a lot of different options. I mean, wing depth, front court depth. Overall, it's just going to be really interesting to see how this thing plays out over the next few weeks. And it's a great point that you mentioned CJ Frederick. The portal is closed. Now, however, if CJ was going to if he was going to enter, he would have already entered. But I think this just gives a clear path that everyone is starting to kind of gather that he intends to be here next season. If you were to ask me, there's been no announcement. We haven't heard much on the front of it, on the storm front of if he was going to return or if he was even going to elect to maybe hang it up. After everybody knows he's battled injuries. He still has the 1 year of eligibility left. And at this rate, it seems like he's going to exhaust his eligibility and try to play this season. If you were to ask me, I don't know anything outside of the fact that I haven't heard anything. But right now, if you were to ask me, I think that would be the way they would be leaning.
Frederick, he's posted a lot of just team content, reposted a lot of it recently. He's basically just carrying on Kendrick Perkins-esque, just like nothing's going on. Like there's no reason to make an announcement, which is all power to him. You don't have to make an announcement.
The I'm back announcement.
Right. You don't have to do that. It's not necessary. And at this point, like Neil said, he will be on the roster pending health. He will be playing this season unless he decides to retire, like you just said, unless he is still mulling that decision. Maybe he is, maybe he's not, but we have no indication that he is going to medically retire and forego that final year of eligibility. And like we said last week, and like I've said in some of our Bearcat group chats, just manifest it, people. Manifest that good health, positivity. Maybe those injury gods can take some solace on CJ Frederick and give him one stretch of health for 30 plus games in a college basketball slate. Maybe we can get that for CJ. Would love to see it. He definitely deserves it, and has earned it in terms of the work ethic and the work he's put in across his college career. Real quick, Neil, Morehead State reportedly added to the schedule for Cincinnati in the non-conference, according to Made for March on Twitter. It's a bye game, reportedly with a 90,000 guarantee for Morehead State, and it's scheduled, according to Made for March, on Friday, November 8th. Now, I don't know if this is going to be firmly set in stone because, correct me if I'm wrong, Neil, there's a little bit of a scheduling limbo with the night game that week for football, right? They could play that game on Friday night. It's one of those scheduling points that is not set in stone just yet for the football team. So I don't know if that for the university would affect things in terms of, I'm sure they don't want to have a football game and a basketball game on the same day, but regardless of that, Morehead State scheduled. You see all-time record against Morehead State, 8-1 since 1949, according to Sport Reference. And Cincinnati now has, Neil, it looks like over half of their non-conference games scheduled in the slate of 24-25 when it comes to Morehead State at Villanova, home against Xavier, at Georgia Tech, home against Howard, and the Heritage Bank Center matchup against Dayton.
Yeah, and it's a great thing you mentioned that week, Russ, because if I remember right, that football game is slated for either a Friday night or a Saturday alongside that Morehead State game. So it'd be really interesting to see what might come out with adding Morehead State to the schedule if that is the home opener, which if you were to ask me, Russ, I think it would be the home opener. But me personally, I kind of like this add to the non-conference schedule because Wes Miller has done one thing very well in terms of scheduling since he came here, and he's getting local schools to come play in the non-conference. Yeah. I mean, we saw it with NKU, we saw it with Dayton, we saw it with Ohio State a few years ago. We now get the opportunity to go see Morehead State, which is just 2 hours down the road. But overall, I mean, I think it's great to have these local rivalries too. I think that is something that a lot of people have discussed and a lot of people have been really kind of hoping for, was to see these local schools kind of come together and play in the non-conference games. So overall, I like the addition of Morehead State. Obviously, they're a mid-major, but I think it's a great opportunity for them. It is a bye game. So obviously you have those expectations, but early season bye games, you can't really come in there expecting to win out. As John Rothstein says, the brutal of epitome in the bye games. But overall,
the epitome of brutality, is that what you're looking for?
Yep, flipped it backwards. But overall, the non-conference games, Russ, have been, I think the non-conference schedule is probably the strongest it's been in recent years. I mean, Xavier's loaded.
Yeah.
You saw what they were able to do in the transfer portal. And then you have Villanova. at Villanova is a good one. Dayton's going to be a top team again, despite losing everybody. They're going through a roster rebuild. Then Georgia Tech's going to be a tough one. It's not going to be what people saw last season at Fifth Third Arena, where it was a 30-point blowout. It's not going to be that. So
Georgia Tech was I think they finished 123rd in Ken Palm. So they're leveling up. They're climbing up as we speak. Damon Stoudemire's team, he's done a good job with that program, and they're climbing. Right ahead of them is Morehead State, Neil, who was a 14 seed in the NCAA tournament this past year. OVC champions, 26-9 overall record. So you're bringing in a respectable program to Fifth Third Arena to help open the season.
And that's a great point too, Russ, because Wes Miller has done it in the past few non-conference seasons. You look at the schedule, and last year they had Stetson, they won the conference. Eastern
Mid-major champions, yep.
Won the conference. Howard was up there in their conference. So he's going out there and he's scheduling conference champions in the non-conference games. It might not be the biggest game of the season, but he's going out there and he's getting some top-tier mid-major teams to come in here and play in a non-conference game. No matter what, I mean, you never know. One of those teams are probably going to be playing in the NCAA tournament at the end of the season. So it's kind of great to have those games on the non-conference schedule like we talked about.
Right. And when you look at what UC did last year in terms of the non-conference slate, it's going to be a lot more difficult this season, just an overall strength of schedule. I mean, when we look at their non-conference slate last year, Neil, 297th in non-conference strength of schedule rating on Ken Palm. I would expect that to be well within the 200s this coming season, just based on what they have already in terms of the road games they have alone. I mean, those are going to help get you to the 200 level. Playing Morehead State the first game of the year when you'd usually play like a Longwood or maybe an NAIA school or something. Like a lot of teams are playing just pure tune-ups to start the season. They're not taking on mid-major conference champions like Morehead State is and can be in their program acumen. So good stuff from the basketball program. They're going to have the schedule. I think they're going to have the roster, and they're going to have the coaching to get to the NCAA tournament. Will they have the health and the just a little bit of luck, fairy dust that they almost all teams need to make the NCAA tournament? We'll find out come this fall. Quick segment break here, and then we get into our second run, looking at Arkansas transfer tight end coming to Cincinnati. We'll break down what Francis Sherman brings. Is it a big impact at all? And also Dontay Corleone tracking in the first round of some way too early 2025 mock drafts. All right, Russ Eltman with you all right here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Neil, got another transfer commitment for the football team. Didn't quite lead with the show with it this episode, though, because I don't know how much we're going to see of this guy on the field. We'll see him a little bit, I'm sure. Mostly, I'm guessing that's a special teamer. But UC gets a commitment from former Louisville and Arkansas tight end Francis Sherman. Went out there for 122 snaps last season. Ho-hum, 51.6 PFF grade, 6'3", 247 pounds, has 5 career passes caught for 40 yards in 3 seasons with 1 year of eligibility left to play in college. Looks like a depth piece, a guy to maybe fill in the role that they potentially told Peyton Singletary he was going to have, and that prompted Peyton Singletary to enter the portal. So to me, Neil, it feels like a depth piece. It feels like a guy that they're just getting to round out the roster in terms of when it comes to the tight ends, that is. And Joe Royer, Gavin Grover, who else?
Joey Belgian.
Joey Belgian, thank you. I always forget the other Joe if I'm referring one. That duo of the Joes is going to be leading, and then I would expect Gavin Grover to mix in a little bit as well in terms of the passing game. But other than that, I think it's pretty firmly set what the hierarchy of tight ends is looking like at UC.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I think Francis Sherman would probably be the depth piece there in the tight end room. But you talked about it, Russ, and we've talked about it all throughout spring ball, that tight end room is probably the most significant place of improvement from a season ago to where it is now. Joe Royer has looked the part so far throughout spring camp, and I'm sure he'll look the part going into fall as long as he can stay healthy and stay on the field. But overall, that tight end room, Russ, let's talk about it. Gavin Grover, you mentioned him, might be a guy that sees the field sometimes, but it's going to be hard to keep him off the field because, I mean, Russ, 18 years old, 6'6", 250 pounds, like you just can't teach that kind of size. And what he was able to do there in the spring, I mean, he can move like a wide receiver at that size. We've seen it on the high school tape, and we saw it firsthand in the spring after a session with Coach Nico Palazetti in the weight room this past offseason. So overall, I'm really excited for Gavin Grover in that tight end position, but Joey Belton is back full healthy too, Russ, and I think it's important we mention that because this is a guy who sustained a major knee injury last season, about halfway through spring ball, that kept him out all of the 2023 season. And then you bring him back here. Now you have a fully healthy arsenal of tight ends that can do a lot of different things. Joe Royer's a big guy, can go out there, catch the balls. Joey Belton's a big red zone target. So is Joe Royer. But you can use Gavin Grover in multiple different ways. You want to use him in the passing game, get an extra blocker out there, or in the run game, get an extra block. But also, I mean, look at it, Russ. I think last year, Shimon Nater was 6'4", 6'5". Peyton Singletary was the guy that was used more in the blocking in the run game. But Shimon Nater started getting going late and then couldn't really keep his footing towards the end of the season. I think he finished with 5 touchdowns and about 400 yards, if I remember right off the top of my head. But this is a tight end room, Russ, where they are going to be heavily involved, in my opinion. Heavily involved with this offense. And to see the production that Joe Royer has had throughout his high school career, things didn't pan out at Ohio State like he had planned, but now gets a fresh start here in Clifton. And I think it's safe to say he'll be tight end 1. And I'm really excited for the tight ends, Russ. I really am. I think the potential there is through the roof. And it's definitely going to be a reason why people look at Cincinnati as tight end U, in my opinion.
I think the tight ends and the offensive line are the skeleton key for bowl eligibility this season and hitting that over-under on the overside. If that offensive line plays to its potential, if this tight end group plays to its potential, gets open in the middle of the field, creates open blocks on heavier alignments for the running backs, creates easier options, like I just said, in the middle of the field or getting open for Brendan Sorsby. Those are the guys, that group of big fellas, along with the tight ends, I think are going to be the key to making things, not that you have to make it easy on Brendan Sorsby because he's bad or anything, but just first year in the system, first full season starting in college football, just trying to make things as easy as possible on him. And I think the best way to do that is by those two position groups hitting their ceiling. And if they hit their ceiling, I find it very difficult to see how this team, with how easy this schedule is compared to other power conference teams, does not get to 6 wins if that does happen. We'll find out, though. And a big key to that as well is Dontay Corleone, who is back in his old spot that he wrecked teams in terms of defensive alignments back in 2022. And Neil, the Sporting News, CBS Sports, and Associated Press all have him going in the first round of their initial opening 2025 mock drafts that they do kind of right after the 2024 draft. This is all obviously wide-ranging, long-term speculation. We don't know exactly if things are going to go like this. They're probably not going to go like this. And I would expect Corleone to probably be more likely a second-round pick and when things are all said and done. But Neil, he could wholeheartedly play himself into that top overall defensive tackle slot for sure this coming season. And a few outlets, like I mentioned, already have him there, with Sporting News putting him 32nd to the to the 49ers, 13th to the Steelers in CBS's model, and then 22nd to the Texans in the AP projection. Big life-changing year stretch coming up for Dontay Corleone.
Yeah, and it's great we're talking about Dontay Corleone because his importance of this team heading into this season is very significant. I mean, he had the opportunity to go pro last season, and I mean, he was hearing from all the mock drafts kind of had him whether it was anywhere from 2nd to 5th round, but he elects to stay home despite all the college landscape and college athletics of the NIL, all that. He elects to stay here, and he's going to be the key foundation. He moves back to that nose tackle position where he dominated so well in a new defensive scheme that will kind of benefit him more than what it's back to like the 2022 route, Russ. I mean, he's back in his natural position. He's going to be able to get upfield and attack the quarterback. But overall, I think the biggest importance for him was for him to come back and take on that leadership role. I know last season he's told us multiple times in press conferences and whatnot, last season wasn't how many expected it to be, but he wanted to come back and be a better leader. And I mean, right now, we've seen it through this offseason. We've seen what he's been able to do on the field, and I'm really excited for him. I really am, because now Russ get the opportunity where he could go out there, have a great season, and potentially be the first defensive tackle taken off the board in next year's 2025 NFL draft, that would be huge. Huge. Because not only did he bet on himself to come back, but he just put Cincinnati football back on the maps after having this downward year.
No doubt about it. Consensus big board from the NFL mock draft database has Dontay Corleone with a little work to do. 43rd overall. My Lord. I mean, Neil, next year, I don't know if he's going to be able to get to that top D-line spot now that I look at it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 defensive tackles in the top 50 on the consensus big board next season. So that's going to be a little tough for Dontay Corleone to maybe get all the way as high as Mason Graham's projection at number 9 overall right now, but could wholeheartedly see Dontay getting into that top 30 for sure, and maybe creeping up to the top 20. He has played like a top 20 player in college football many a time before in his career. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. Yes!